Hi and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Today's video is a one big mega wrap up. Basically, I didn't edit any of my previous wrap-ups that I filmed starting from November 2021 to May 2022. So this is just a compilation of all of those wrap-ups. I didn't want to delete all of the footage that I already had, so I've just put them all together and I hope you'll like it. Okay, let's start with November 2021. So the first book that I've read is called Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Now, I was really looking forward to this book because I really liked The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. And I think I was expecting a very similar book, like very flowery writing, almost non-existent plot, you know, that kind of style. And I didn't get that. This is actually a high fantasy, which really surprised me because I would assume that it would fit magical realism more, but I don't know, that's just my personal opinion. Also, the world building outside of the circus was pretty much non-existent, which I didn't really like. The love interest in this is questionable as well. I will continue the series probably. I still kind of want to know what happens because the story is okay, like it's interesting. Did it deserve the absolute slander that it completely copied The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern? I don't think so, really. Then I've read Heartless by Marissa Meyer. I have the Czech copy. This is the backstory of the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. The main pinpoint of the story is basically love, and one thing that I really liked was that there wasn't an insta-love, at least. It seemed a bit too slow. I enjoyed the last 100 pages the most, and I think the rest of the book could have been just filled with, you know, total nonsense, because that's how the original Alice in Wonderland's books are, and there definitely wasn't enough nonsense in this book, and it was a little disappointing. I give it still like 3 stars. It was okay. Then I've listened to Alice in the Wonderland by Lewis Carroll as an audiobook. Now, I'm one of those people who have never read Alice in Wonderland as a child. My mom didn't really like it, so she didn't read it to me. And I enjoyed the book. Like, obviously it's full of total nonsense. Also, there was a caterpillar smoking a hookah or something, which was interesting to see in children's book. Like, I was not expecting that, but that's only because I'm judging it with today's standards, obviously. It's a classic for a reason. I give it 4 stars. I actually really enjoyed it. Then I've listened to Sadie by Courtney Summers as an audiobook. This book is about a young girl who has a stutter, which is a really important part of the story, and her sister gets murdered and the police don't really do anything, and she knows who the killer is and she starts looking for him. And it is such a powerful, amazing story. I've rated it 5 stars. Also, I really recommend reading this as an audiobook because there are some parts where a man investigates what happened to Sadie, which is the older girl, and he's making a podcast about it. He basically tries to figure out like what the hell happened here, like who killed the sister called Maddie, what happened to Sadie, what's going on. And there are like different people casted as characters, which I have really enjoyed. It's really immersive, and yeah, I highly recommend the audiobook by full cast. Like, trust me, the experience I think is just so much better than if you would just read it as a book. Then I've read The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. I've read the original Grisha trilogy just years ago now. I don't even remember when. I haven't read Six of Crows yet, but I will. And this month I picked up The Language of Thorns, which is basically a collection of fairy tales set in that world. I really liked that the stories are basically set in different countries, and you can really tell based on the style of the story, like from which country the story is from. It also has these really beautiful illustrations. You start off with just a small illustration, and as the story progresses, it kind of grows more and more until there is a full picture at the end. It usually directly corresponded with what was happening in the story on paper. It was my favorite read of this year so far, probably. It was truly an amazing book, and I highly recommend it. Then I've read Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is the Czech edition again. I was really disappointed actually. It is about a cafe where if you sit in a very specific place at a very specific time of the day, you can travel to the past or the future. That was the last story, which kind of didn't make a lot of sense because of the previous rules, but anyways, I digress. And one of the rules are that nothing will change. Basically, even if you would tell the person like, hey, you're gonna die tomorrow, don't do this, they would just die in a different way probably. I think the main reason why I didn't like it was the writing. The writing was just too simple for me, but that could have been also the fault of the translation. The second thing was that sometimes there were just outright bad toxic relationships in it, and I couldn't really tell if it was like intentional. If you have read this book, like, let me know your thoughts. Then I've read Your Soul is a River by Nikita Gill, and it is a typical modern poetry book. I do like poetry. I'm not the biggest fan of classical poetry, and I really enjoyed it. I rated it 3 stars. And last but not least, I've read a children's book. I feel like that's becoming a reoccurring theme on my channel now. Alice in Wonderland is also a kid's book, right? It's okay, it doesn't matter. So I've read The Adventures of Harry Stevenson by Ellie Pieh. I do have the Czech edition again. And this is just a heartfelt story about a guinea pig. And I do love guinea pigs, so I love this story as well. And what can I tell you? I'm a simple person, okay? If there's a guinea pig, I will like it, okay? I've rated it 5 stars. Hello again. So let's jump into December. I wasn't reading a lot in December, but I still managed to read a few books and especially a lot of audiobooks. So the first book I've read is The Octonomy by Trevor Alan Forrest. This is the prologue. I did an entire video talking about this book, so I'm not going to talk about it as much. I've explained everything in that video, how the world works, what I liked about this book, what I didn't like. And actually there has been an update on the second book that will come out December 2022, so this year, which I'm really excited about because I am wondering where this story will go, and especially because there's so much mystery surrounding this book. Again, please watch the video I made on this book. Then I've read Legendary and Finale by Stephanie Garber as an audiobook, and I'm not sure if I really like the series. I think I rated it like 3 stars. These are the second and third books in the Caraval series, and apparently Caraval was supposed to be a standalone, and I feel like you can really feel it because Legendary is totally different, same way with Finale. And what I didn't like about these books were mainly the main characters, Stella and... Scarlet and Tella. Because it seemed to me like they were always focusing on what wasn't important, and they were just not great protagonists in my opinion. Which fair enough, but also I really hated the romance. I just found it super creepy, and I thought that at least one character is going to be like, hey, maybe this is just a bit weird, maybe you shouldn't really date him, you know, but no, everybody just thought it was okay. So yikes. And listen, I'm just so over this trope when an immortal falls in love with a really young teenage girl. Listen, it was creepy in Twilight already, and it's still creepy till this day. I really, really don't like this trope. Let's jump into January. So the first book I've listened to was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I talked about this book already on my channel. Again, I made a full video on it, but it's not spoiler free, so I will introduce this book to you if you haven't heard about it. It is set in a futuristic dystopian society where kids can have robots as friends. They're bought for that specific purpose. And we follow Clara, who is this robot. They're called AFs, that is purchased by this family for a child named Josie. And we go from there. So many stuff happen. It's very thought-provoking. I loved it. Like I said, I made an entire video about it where I talked about certain theories. I give it 5 stars, so I really love this book. Then I've read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and I feel like everyone and their mother knows what the story is about, so I'm not going to talk about it as much. I did like it. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. I am not that big of a fan of Charles Dickens' writing, but I like this book. Then I've read Bad Blood by John Carreyrou, and this is a non-fiction book, and I loved it. It's a book about Elizabeth Holmes and her fake company Theranos. Basically, the company promised to make hundreds of blood tests from one single drop of blood, and that came out to be a total scam. And John Carreyrou was the reporter who first uncovered how big of a scam it actually is, and he later on wrote an entire book about it. He interviewed a lot of people, and it's unbelievable. I truly recommend this book. I gave it 5 stars. I feel like I have read a lot of great books in January, so a lot of these books will have 5 or 4 stars. I usually don't rate books that high, but this was worth it. Then I've read A Psalm for the Wild Belt by Becky Chambers, and again as an audiobook, and it's super short. I really liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars. It is about a non-binary monk that meets a robot. It's set in a futuristic society where robots are not working in the factories anymore because there was a revolution. And now they are just living in the woods, and usually humans don't meet them. This is a very warm and fuzzy book, and it has some philosophical elements as well. Again, highly recommend this book. Then I've read Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski, and this is the second collection of short stories. And I rated it 3.5 stars. For some reason, I just always have a really hard time getting into these books. I think it's just mainly the writing and also the misogyny that is just almost on every page. I thought that I was kind of going crazy because everybody tells me that it's actually a great book. It's not misogynistic at all. And then books with Emily Fox. Emily, she made a video trying to read the first book, which is The Last Wish. And she pointed out so many wrong things with the series. I tried even reading the third book, which is technically the first book in the Ciri and Geralt story. And I don't know, I really want to like these books, but for some reason they're just not for me. And I am a huge fantasy reader, but something about these books is just always putting me off. So I think I will take a break from this series from now on. It's not for me. Then I've read The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, again as an audiobook, and I really didn't like this book. I know that there are people who absolutely love it, so I guess I'm in a minority here, but I just didn't find the story very intriguing, especially the present time POVs. So there are 3 POVs, and one of them is a poisoner, and there was a real historical figure named Baba Anushka, I think, who dispatched these poisons for women who wanted to get rid of their husbands. The second POV is Eliza, who is almost like an apprentice to this woman, and the third POV is set in present time. So the previous POVs are set in the past. I can't remember if it was 18th century England or 19th century England. I'm not sure exactly. And then we have like a present POV, and I hated the present POV so much. It made me so angry. Caroline was just insufferable. She was a doormat to her cheating husband. This is not really a spoiler because you learn this like very, very early on in the book. And I hated the present POV so much, and it honestly ruined the book for me. If it didn't have the present POV, I think I would actually really like this book, especially if the past POVs were more developed. But this way, really didn't like it. I gave it 2 stars only. And the last book that I've read in January was actually like the best book I have read probably in the past few months, and it is called The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. We follow our main character Monique, who is a writer for a well-known magazine, and she meets Evelyn Hugo, who is a celebrity, like a Hollywood icon from the 60s. She calls her and she wants her to write a book about her life. And sometimes you even have like little articles from the time about the scandals of Evelyn, and then you actually learn the reality behind it, which is for the most part totally different from what has been reported. Evelyn herself has these huge secrets that if they would come out, they would probably ruin her reputation in Hollywood and she wouldn't be able to be an actress anymore, and now she's ready to reveal them. So you go from her childhood to her trying to make it in Hollywood, which isn't always pretty, as you can imagine, to her just having a really scandalous life. It is so good. Trust me, if you pick up this book, you will not be disappointed. There are so many quotes that just resonated with me, and even though Evelyn herself is pretty unlikable, I still ended up liking her to a certain extent. It is really, really, really great. The first audiobook that I finished is The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. And I actually really like this book. I loved the whole setting. It is a retelling of the legend of the moon goddess Chonga, I think that's how you say her name, and her daughter. And to be fair, I was really confused in the very beginning because I didn't realize that we were in the immortal realm like the whole time. So every single character was basically an immortal, and I didn't really understand the whole hierarchy of it, but that's okay. This book is full of Chinese mythology, it's whimsical, it's a great read. Now, the reason why I didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I would is because everything goes right for the main character. And at some point I got a little bored because no matter what she did, I guess this is a bit of a spoiler, but no matter what she did, she would always succeed. And I just, for some reason, I really want the main characters to struggle at least a little bit, you know. I think the main character's name is Xingyin. Xingyin was just doing everything right. Everything went right for her. And I feel like that when you have only characters who are immortal or can use magic, are extremely powerful, at some point they're not really relatable anymore. And that's what I felt, and I couldn't really connect with the main character. So I gave it like 3 stars. I still liked it. The second audiobook I finished is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is a super known thriller slash mystery, and we follow a bunch of POVs, and I think we know that there is a body from the start, but I don't think it's really mentioned in the story, or maybe I just missed it. I'm not sure exactly. And I liked it again, like it was okay. To be fair, I feel like I would have enjoyed this book more if we knew from the start who dies, because that way you could guess which one of the POVs actually decided to kill the victim, and you could kind of, piece everything together. This way I wasn't really sure like where are we going with this, because there is a lot of character build up, a lot of character development throughout the book, and you're not exactly sure like what's it for until the very end. Then it kind of all makes sense. I think I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. I will definitely be picking up more of Lucy Foley's books in the future. Then I've read as an audiobook again Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, and this is an incredibly difficult story to read. So it follows the main character, who is a black woman from the 70s, and she gets transported back in time to, I think it was 19th century America, to a white child that we learn pretty early on that the child is actually an ancestor of the main character. I think her name was Dana. And every single time this child is in danger, or later on when it becomes an adult, then Dana is pulled from her own timeline to be in this timeline where slavery is still rampant. And by the way, Rufus, which is the white child in the beginning, he is actually a son of a slave owner, or like a master plantation owner. It's incredibly powerful. It shows well how racism is just being taught, and that's all I'm gonna say. Just please read it if you didn't. But of course, it has every trigger warning you can probably think of. It's incredibly difficult to read, but very, very amazing. Great book. 5 stars. And then I wanted to read or listen to something light and fun, and so I listened to The Duke and I, which is the first Bridgerton book. And oh my god, why did I do this to myself? So The Duke and I follows Daphne and Simon, and if you have watched the TV show, you know who I'm talking about. And one thing that kind of surprised me is that you only follow these 2 characters. There aren't any information about the other siblings really, like we have in the show, which I guess makes sense because we probably would get bored easily with the TV show if it just followed Daphne and Simon. Now, this book, I knew about the controversies surrounding it. I still decided to listen to it. I thought, let's just see how bad it actually is. And it is pretty bad. It's really bad. The thing is, you can put topics like sexual assault or misogyny, anything like that, toxic relationships, into books, but you shouldn't romanticize it. And this book definitely romanticizes this behavior. And if this was written like 200 years ago, I probably would have tolerated a little more. But because it was written, I think in the early 2000s, there are no excuses. I ended up not enjoying it as much. I thought that Simon and Daphne were both really, really obnoxious. And even though I wanted to continue with the series before the 2nd season comes out, which I think is already out by now, for sure, I just couldn't bring myself to continue. So in March, I have read 5 books. Some of them were audiobooks, some of them were physical books. I already talked about certain books in my video titled I've read like Jennie from Blackpink for a week, so I will not be really talking about those books in this video anymore because I would just be repeating myself. So the first book like that is Heart and Soul by Jen Frederick. I already talked about that one. I gave it 2 stars. Didn't really enjoy it as much. This is a romance that's set in Korea where a Korean adoptee goes to find her real family and then just stuff happens. Didn't like it. I've also read Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking by Malcolm Gladwell, and I really enjoyed this book. I give it 4 stars. It's a psychological book about the way we make assumptions and make really quick decisions in our day-to-day life. Highly recommend it. I talked about it in said video already, so I'm not gonna talk about it anymore. Then I have read this collection of poems by Sappho. This collection is the Penguin Classic one called Come Close, and it was really fun to read. I feel like I was transported back in time to ancient Greece. Her poems are very whimsical and beautiful, and I highly recommend it. I've read it in English, and I'm gonna be honest, sometimes I wasn't exactly sure about the meaning of the poems, but I feel like that's pretty common when it comes to poetry. I feel like that's nothing new. Even though English is my second language, I feel like I can still understand it well, but when it comes to poetry, I struggle, okay? But I didn't struggle as much when I was reading Sappho, so I think that speaks for itself. Then I've listened to The Queen's Poisoner by Jeff Wheeler, and this is the first book in like a trilogy, but then you have another trilogy that comes after that takes place like after like a few decades. I'm not exactly sure, but The Queen's Poisoner is the first book in the first trilogy, and it's a YA fantasy. I would almost say that it's middle grade because it follows a boy named Owen who is only 8 years old, and he gets taken to the king's palace in King Fountain. The magic system is interesting because only a few people are fountain blessed, which means that they can sort of use magic, but they can only use one specific kind of magic. Each of them has a different gift, and it's a really, really great book in my opinion. I actually started listening to the second one, and the second one takes place roughly 10 years after the events of the first one, and it's so different. Like, it's good, but it feels very different. Now there's more politics, and I'm not gonna say anything else. I'm not gonna spoil it for you guys. Just go and read it if you like YA fantasies. I feel like you would really like this book as well, especially because it still feels like YA, but like a different one, like a more unique one in my personal opinion. And then I've listened to Anxious People by Frederick Backman, and this book I feel like surprised me a lot because I thought that this would be like a romance novel based on the cover, but it's more of a cozy mystery kind of vibe. It's heavily character oriented, and you follow this group of characters that get tangled up in a bank robbery, or more so like a hostage kind of situation, and I actually really enjoyed it. To be honest, I feel like the book contains a lot of snarky remarks towards younger people, like especially millennials, that I didn't really appreciate. I feel like the book tried to focus on the generational differences so much that it almost created like this generational war, but overall I ended up liking it. I was just sucked into the story. I couldn't put it down. I had to listen to the book constantly. I think I've listened to it in like 2 or 3 days, something crazy like that, which I usually don't listen to books that quickly. Also, I feel like the title in itself is a little misleading because there aren't a lot of people who were anxious. Maybe one out of all of the characters, but that was it. It's me again. Let's talk about what I've read in April. At first, I finished The Viscount Who Loved Me, which is the second book in the Bridgerton series by Julia Quinn. And to be fair, I actually kind of liked it. I think it was better than the first book for sure, even though the pattern was just very obvious and predictable. But I didn't really mind it. Again, we have a male lead with lots of problems who just doesn't want to get married, and once he gets married, he still has a lot of problems. And I'm starting to think that there's this common theme that just these male leads in the Bridgerton series don't need a romantic partner. They just need lots and lots of extensive therapy instead. I ended up actually liking it in the end. I rated it 3 stars. It was okay. Then I've listened to A Splinter Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. And this is a very loose retelling of Sleeping Beauty. Half of it is set in modern times and half of it is set in a medieval fictional world. And I was so excited for a feminist retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but this was a hot mess from start to finish. Just random plot twists that didn't even make any sense, and I ended up just rating it like 2.25 stars. Just it really wasn't my cup of tea in the end. It was really short, and so I think I've listened to it in like 1 or 2 sittings, but to be fair, the story was absolutely ridiculous. Then I've listened to The Hidden Life of Ice, Dispatches from the Disappearing World by Marco Tedesco. It's a book written by a scientist who goes to Greenland on a scientific mission, and he describes a lot of the stuff that he's studying there, as well as the problems of the area, some mythology as well. Part of it almost reads like a biography because the author talks about his family as well and his life and career, and I ended up really enjoying this book. I rated it 4-point-something stars. The scientific parts were not too hard to understand, so even if you're a complete noob like me, chances are you will probably understand it too. Then I've listened to The Thief's Daughter by Jeff Wheeler, and this is the second book in the King Fountain series that I absolutely love. We followed the main character who is 8 years old in the first book, and now he is 17 years old, and it's about power, politics, war, battle strategies. There's just so much happening, and we follow this main character as he rises to power. I highly recommend this series. The first book is just a feel-good, positive vibes only kind of book. The second book has way more betrayal and way more plot twists and bloodshed and death, and it's a really good book. Highly recommended. I really recommend the audiobooks as well. Then I've listened to Make a Scene by Mimi Grace, and this is a romance written by a Black author, and I specifically chose this book as a part of my Storygraph reading challenge, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically a challenge that is supposed to broaden your horizons and discover new genres, and you have 10 prompts that you should finish by the end of the year. Really love the challenge. To be fair, I didn't really enjoy this book as much, and even though I'm reading romances more, I don't think that it will ever be my favorite genre because a lot of it is just kind of predictable. This is a typical fake dating situation where the main character needs a boyfriend to bring to her cousin's wedding, and this cousin actually is marrying her ex, so she really wants to show off. So she convinces this dude that is working across the street from her to be her fake boyfriend, and of course stuff happens. There's quite a lot of sex scenes as well in this book that I just didn't really enjoy. I always think that it's super cringy. It was nice, it was sweet, but it wasn't anything special really. I think I rated it like 2.75 stars. I'm not really a big fan of romances anyway, so I can't really give you like an accurate rating of it, if you know what I mean. Then I've listened to Greek Gods by Liv Albert, which is a handbook on Greek mythology. It contains pretty much all the stories in a very nice, digestible format. I highly recommend it if you just want to get into Greek mythology, but you don't really know where to start and you don't really want to read retellings either. I feel like this would be a really, really nice introduction to Greek mythology. Like I said, highly recommend it. Then I've read Seasons of the Moon by Michael Carabetta, and this is a non-fiction book about the lore of full moon in different cultures. It's very short. I think I've read it in like an hour really. You have lots of pictures as well resembling the moon of each month. I love learning about the mythology and customs of other cultures, so this was just a perfect book for me really. I rated it 4.25 stars. And last but not least, this is the only physical book I finished in April, and it is Legend by Mary Lou, which is the first book in a YA dystopian trilogy. Very famous one. I've never read it before and I liked it. I really missed the YA dystopian genre, and it almost took me back to when Hunger Games was really, really popular. We follow two main characters who couldn't be more different. One of the characters is part of the elite, and the other one is a very well-known criminal who sabotages the Republic. The United States are split into two parts, the Republic and the colonies, and these two parts constantly lead war against each other. This is a enemies to lovers situation, and I feel like it was just very abrupt. This was a classic case of insta-love that we used to see a lot in YA books at the time, but it's okay. I rated it 3 stars, really liked it. Hi again, so now we're in May, and in the middle of May I've decided to do this reading challenge that I've read like Namjoon for a whole month. I've started it in the second week of May and I finished it in the second week of June. And so I will already talk about a lot of the books that I've read in that specific video, so I will not talk about those books anymore. I will just talk about the books that were not in that video. Starting from Junket by Lauren Groff. This is a short story of a writer going on this luxurious getaway. I've listened to it on Scribd. I think it's a Scribd original, and it was short, it was sweet, kind of not memorable, so I rated it only 3 stars. Then I've listened to Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This is a very popular book. It's about an orphaned girl that doesn't speak, and the only thing that she has left from her mother is her diary, and the last line in the diary is, "You will be safe, but only if you stay away from Gallant," something like that. And she gets old enough to be kicked out of the orphanage, but then a mysterious letter comes and she gets invited to Gallant. I know so many people didn't really find this book enjoyable, but I loved it. I absolutely loved the atmosphere, the plot. I was completely drawn into the story and I wanted more. I wish this wasn't a standalone. I just love this gothic, mysterious atmosphere, and I need to read more books by V.E. Schwab, I feel like, because I haven't read that many. I rated Gallant 4 stars. Then I've read this really short ebook, Must See Places of the World by Speedy Publishing. I've read this for a video of mine that I did on my ASMR channel. It has the world's most horrendous font that I couldn't read, but I liked the photos in it, so I rated it 3 stars. Now I will give you a short list of books that I've read for the Reading Like Namjoon video. Again, if you want to know more about these books, just go watch that video, because I filmed each review right after I finished the book, so I feel like it's very authentic and organic. At first, I've read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, Almond by Son Won-pyeong, The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera, Human X by Han Kang, Kim Ji-young Born 1982 by Cho Nam-ju, and The Stranger by Albert Camus. Those are all the books I've read in May. Next time I will make separate videos and it will not be as messy as this video. I hope you still enjoyed this video and I'll see you next time.